Pleasure to see everybody today. I'm immensely excited for today's webinar. Some of you know I've spoken to more so in the past than others, and nonetheless, thank you for attending. We are going to dive into security and compliance, really, and anything and all things Microsoft in that regard. So as a quick introduction for those of you who may not know me as well, my name is Jackson McCord. I'm your modern work and security specialist. So essentially, I help facilitate security and compliance related conversations for Microsoft's higher ed and K-12 customers really across the US. And in the past, in my time at Microsoft, I've had the immense pleasure of working with Gareth and Tony here at LevaCloud, who've done nothing short of a fantastic job really contextualizing a lot of the information that I discuss regularly that Microsoft provides. Of course, there's a lot out there, right? What does that mean for the specifics of each individual institution, each individual IT and security team? That's where they come in, contextualizing this information. And we're going to kick off that process today. And with that, I will hand it over back to Tony.
Oh, thank you, Jackson. Gracious introduction, as always. I appreciate that. We've been working with Jackson for years now. Great relationship. We're very happy to have you guys here with us today. We're going to go over all things Microsoft A5 and security and compliance and all the bells and whistles that are located within that licensing, and how, in our past experience, it's benefited other school districts and higher education universities as we've worked with them over the past 4 years. I'd like to draw your attention to the Q&A section up at the top. So if you have any questions, as my partner and our founder, Gareth Young, is going through the presentation, please pop them up there. And at the end, I will address them with Gareth to try to get them answered today. Okay? Gareth, it's your show.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And yeah, again, appreciate everyone coming along here today. So let's kind of jump in. Halloween Spooktacular. So I wanted to start out by talking about some of the threats that these tools can actually be used to defend against, some that we commonly see. And one of the biggest ones that we run into is ransomware. I mean, it's rife at the moment. It really is. So just to take a step back, what actually is ransomware? So it's a malicious software that encrypts files and systems. The victims lose access to their data, and that not only affects the organization, the school, the college, the university, but the actual individuals as well. Your staff, your students. Now, generally speaking, the attackers will demand a ransom. Typically, that's in cryptocurrencies in exchange for the encryption key. Some attackers actually exfiltrate your data. They copy it out of the environment, and they'll actually threaten to sell it or leak it if the ransom's not paid. And sometimes they'll even go a step further and contact individuals that they've identified from that data that they've exfiltrated as an extra layer of the extortion. Now, CISA does advise against paying ransoms. They want everyone to focus on prevention and strong cybersecurity practices instead. Unfortunately, a lot of organizations do actually end up paying the ransom. Now, just to kind of look at some of the different statistics here related to the education side of things, it really has continued to grow year over year, the volume of ransomware attacks against education. And believe it or not, there was an increase of 84% just between June of 22 and May of 23. Now, there are some kind of key threat groups that attack the education sector specifically. Vice Society is one of those. They have different kind of threat tactics that they'll follow that we want to sort of understand, and I'll show you some tools that are in your arsenal that you can use to kind of get a jump on some of the different tactics that these groups use. And a lot of this is focused on schools in the US. I wanted to sort of compare that to the UK, where I'm originally from, where the kind of frequency is a little bit less than over here. So that there's something very specific about the security posture of schools in the US that's really kind of driving these attacks at the moment. And I think it's, as we'll discuss as we go through, some of the different areas of vulnerability I see in the US education system that we want to make sure we're addressing. And it goes without saying that when these breaches happen, they cost a lot of money. And beyond the hard cost of actually dealing with it, the downtime and the sort of hit you can take from a reputational standpoint as well, is something that's not really considered when it comes to defending against this stuff. So there's more to it than just the money, for sure. Now, how do these actually unfold? So I've broken it down into sort of different phases here of what happens during a sort of ransomware situation. So essentially, threat actors will start out by looking to identify potential targets, and they'll start to do kind of reconnaissance against you and your environment to gather data that would be kind of crucial for them actually performing one of these attacks. Once they've gathered enough data, they'll try and gain a foothold into your environment, kind of get through the door. And that can happen via phishing emails. It could be like a malicious website, or even vulnerable software. If we're not up to date on our software patches, they can get kind of a route through with that, depending on what they find. Once they get that initial foothold into the environment, the goal is for them to move as far across it laterally as they can, so that they can actually get their software on as many systems as possible. And it's at this point as well that they will look to exfiltrate your data to use for what we call those double or triple extortion attacks, where they're using that data against you, so you can't just restore from backup, essentially. Now, once we've kind of got to that phase, they've maybe got a copy of your data, they'll continue to deploy the ransomware through systems, and they'll also try and target backup systems as well. I've actually heard of situations where they turn off and delete backups in some cases, or previous versions of files, if you've got file versioning, that kind of thing, so that they basically cripple you as much as possible, to maximize the impact of when the ransomware is executed. And oftentimes what happens is when that execution kind of takes place and the files get encrypted, if we don't have the right visibility and protection in the environment, you're likely going to get caught off guard and not realize what's happening until it's too late. So we're going to talk about, we need processes, procedures, and skills to help identify these threats as early as possible, so that we can stop them happening and even put things in place to prevent the extent of the damage that they can do in the first place as well. Now, once this encryption situation's taken place, at that point you're going to see some sort of notification from them, asking for that ransom. And as I say, if you refuse, because you're like, oh well, our backup's fine, we'll just restore from that, that's where they could come in, and talk about the double or triple extortion side of things, where they threaten to leak the data or contact the people that are actually identified in it. So a robust recovery plan is really crucial for this. The tools only go part of the way, and like I say, it's recommended to avoid paying that ransom, but because a lot of organizations don't really have a robust plan around this stuff, and they've maybe just, you don't know what you don't know, right? They've not put in the right proactive security capabilities. They're just unable to kind of deal with a situation like this and don't have any other choice. So what can we do? Well, that's where we start to look at Microsoft 365 A5. It's the step up from Microsoft 365 A3. and it adds a lot of additional security and compliance capabilities. And it's actually kind of interesting because we go into some customers who have kind of made the investment and don't even realize the full extent of what they're paying for. I mean, you can see a lot of different things on this view here. And our focus today is obviously going to be the security and compliance side of things, where this product SKU really shines. Now, under the hood, all of these Microsoft security tools are designed to align with something you've probably heard of called zero trust security. So just to explain what that actually is, zero trust is an industry standard. It's not a product, and different vendors like Microsoft have created products that align with this new sort of security model. And the reason that it actually exists is, for a long time, we were following an approach called the perimeter security model. So that's generally where we would put a firewall around our network, and anything inside of that firewalled network was considered to be secure. So all of our systems, our data, our users, that kind of thing. And, for remote access to that, we might have had a VPN, which might have been authenticated with a username, a password, and maybe like a multi-factor authentication token code. But once you were through that kind of barrier in the network, generally speaking, you'd have access to everything in there and always considered to be good. And in that model as well, because we're assuming that everything is safe in there and trusted, we would just use like antiviruses and reactive security tools that would react when a threat was identified. So, as things evolved, we started to use different cloud services, whether it's Microsoft 365, whether it's Google Workspace, which is quite prevalent in education, or Blackboard, or one of those other SaaS applications that's out there. The way we access those, storing data in those different applications, it's kind of gradually eroded the secure perimeter. So we've got data in places where really we don't have the visibility or control around it, and that opens the door to risk and to different threats, ransomware included. So with that, zero trust was defined as a way to say, well, you know what? By default, we're actually not going to trust anything, and we have to look at very granular conditions that we define to decide if you are trusted enough to be able to access our resources. So what we're looking at here is Microsoft's version of this zero trust methodology. On the left, you see the identities and the endpoints. Those are what we consider the foundational pillars of zero trust, because generally everything that is initiated from an access standpoint comes from one of those two things, whether it's an actual user identity, or whether it's like an application or a service account or something like that. Then on the right-hand side, we have the other pillars: applications, data, infrastructure, and network, which are generally the things you're trying to access. In the middle, we've got the heart of the zero trust architecture, which is a tool called conditional access. And think of it as like the gatekeeper. So instead of the firewall that was wrapped around everything, you're instead going through these gates to access resources. And we have very granular rules that we define to say whether you can access them. So for example, let's say it's Tony. He's working from home and he's signing in with a personal laptop to any of our cloud tools, honestly. Well, we might decide that when Tony signs into the HR stuff that's hosted in Google Docs, that he is not allowed to download any documents from there to his personal laptop because we don't trust it enough. And he gets that message and he's like, oh, I really do need to download this document. So he jumps on to his school issued laptop instead, which we're managing with Microsoft Intune. But guess what? It's got some problems. He's not updated it in weeks. It's been off. There's an issue with the antivirus. So because of that, he also gets limited access because that device is not fully compliant with our security control standards. And he reaches out to the help desk on Teams, and they tell him, well, you need to run Windows Update, and let's get that antivirus fixed for you just now. And once that all becomes compliant again, he gets full access to the resources that he's trying to access. All of these different conditions, where they're signing in from, how their account's been behaving recently, the device, its health status, all of that stuff comes together to kind of give us this zero trust capability. And these solutions are a combination of the different kind of security tools that you see on the screen there. So I'm going to dive into one of the kind of key tools that's part of this ecosystem and part of the A5 SKU, which is called Microsoft 365 Defender. This is one of the key ones that would certainly help us in the sort of event of a ransomware incident or even other types of threats. And basically, the way that all of these tools work is they talk to each other. And they use a thing called XDR, which is Extended Detection and Response. You might have heard of that kind of buzzword out there on LinkedIn. And basically what that means is when a security threat occurs, let's say Tony's laptop gets a virus, and that virus, gives someone a foothold into the environment, like maybe it's a Trojan, and they kind of get access and try to make their way up into SharePoint online or into his email to do different things. Those are threats that happen in different tools. And in kind of the old way of doing security, where we maybe go out and buy a best of breed tool from different vendors and have 5 different dashboards to manage, when alerts are coming into those dashboards, the security analysts are left kind of looking, saying, well, is this stuff related or is it not? I have no idea. Whereas with this new sort of evolution of these best of breed security tools, you're investing in a security platform that's deeply integrated. And if there are security incidents that span across multiple of these domains, which is very common because a threat actor is wanting to work their way through your environment, then Microsoft 365 Defender, which is the Sunday name for the security.microsoft.com portal, it's going to show you one incident, and it's going to match together all of the alerts from these different tools under that one incident, so exactly what's related without having to spend a bunch of time filtering through logs. Now we're going to dive into a couple of these tools on here today in this session, just so we can kind of look under the cover of how they actually work. But before we do that, let's talk about one other feature of Microsoft 365 Defender. Is this dashboard called Threat Analytics. And this thing is actually pretty awesome. So going back to, we need to understand the tactics that these different threat groups are using. That's exactly what Microsoft's security research teams are doing. And, they're doing a lot of digging out on the dark web and other places to pull together information on how these different threats take place. And they're actually documenting it in this tool that you'll get access to through that Microsoft 365 Defender dashboard. And not only does it give you a report that tells you what the threat is and how it happens, it will also give you information on whether you have any current open incidents related to it, whether you're exposed to it with the way that your security posture is currently configured. And it'll also give you recommendations on things that you can actually change and tune in the environment to better protect yourself against the threat. Because as we're going to sort of explore, turning on the tools on a basic level and just kind of deploying them isn't going to provide you with maximum protection. There are lots of kind of little bits and pieces that we need to do on top of that to ensure that you're fully covered. And we'll explore that as we kind of get further into this here. But great proactive security tool, good place to start to kind of see, hey, what extra things should I be doing? Now, moving on to Microsoft Defender for Office 365. This is the advanced email message document protection capability within the A5 license. So if you're doing email inside of 365, great, it will give you coverage. If you're not, that's also not a big deal, because if you're using the actual Office applications, or if you're using Teams, you know, you're going to get coverage from this in that zone as well. But let's just kind of walk through some of the different capabilities inside of this tool. So if you are using this for email, this is actually how it works behind the scenes. It's got this really deep multi-layered filtering stack. And basically the aim of this is to eliminate threats and attacks before they land in your inbox. So the first line of defense against threats is the sort of edge protection capabilities here and the sender intelligence capabilities. And actually, a large percentage of the emails that get sent to Office 365 don't even make it into the cloud environment, thanks to these two layers here. The features within the sender intelligence side of things are basically designed to ensure that senders are who they say they are. You know, it helps catch spam, bulk, spoofing attempts, and it plays a large role in phish detection as well. It'll give advanced protection against threats like business email compromise or impersonation attacks, which are pretty huge in the moment. And the AI capability that's built into this, it will learn from the things that it sees, and it will automatically share that information across all of the Office 365 environments in the world, so that they instantly know how to kind of protect against the different threats that are being discovered. So the content filtering layer, it takes a deeper look at the contents of the message. It'll examine things like links, files, as well as look at the actual body of the message for any signs of suspicion. And then after emails are delivered, it continues to check links at the time of click across all of Office 365. And it'll also remove any messages from an inbox where it discovers they're malicious, and it'll tie individual messages to a broader campaign. And, you know, for those of you, like I say, that are maybe using Google Workspace today for email, but you've got an Office 365 environment that you're also using for a lot of stuff, you'll see here that kind of last bit of capability that I talked about for the URL detonation side of things gives you protection across those different apps too. It's not just email for this. Now, moving into the investigation and hunting side of things. So priority account protection is a feature that helps you keep track of the users in your organization who might be the highest visibility or the most targeted. So the priority accounts are built on the concept of tags, and with tags, your security team can identify, you know, specific attributes that they want to assign to users. You know, maybe we want a tag for HR, for example, or for finance. And once you've assigned the tags, they'll surface all the way through the product in the different dashboards, so that when your security team is actually looking at the different incidents coming in, their eyes will be immediately drawn to the ones that are tagged. So it's like, okay, this is a high impact user. You know, if they're compromised, then that's a bigger problem than one of our, janitorial staff that doesn't have a lot of access to anything. They just look at email. But if it's, you know, a VIP user or an exec or an admin, honestly, of the environment, like a global admin, then we're going to want to look at them first, because they've got the most potential to do the most damage if their account's compromised. So really useful tool to just sort of help prioritize approach. Now, other tools at your sort of disposal in Defender for Office 365, you've got this capability called the Threat Explorer. And basically what this does is it allows you to really dive into all of the mail coming through the environment and understand, you know, what was in the emails, why were they blocked, why weren't they blocked, you know, what types of threats were in here, all those different things that you likely need to do as part of your investigation. It also gives you the ability to do bulk actions against email, which is really useful. So I had a situation recently where one of our universities in Missouri was getting hit with a whole load of phishing emails, and they were surfaced to the security team because the users were reporting them. Now, you might ask, why didn't the tools detect them as soon as they started coming in? Well, believe it or not, the reason for that was that the emails were coming from legitimate sources in another university in the state. And if I was to hazard a guess, that other university had likely been compromised. Threat actors had compromised a number of student accounts and were using those to resend out or send out phishing emails. And this is one of those things that's on the list of things I see a lot in education. And I know it can be tough depending on the use case, especially like in K-12 if you've got young kids or whatever, but multi-factor authentication, if we've got accounts that don't have it, then it's really easy for threat actors to compromise them and then abuse those accounts. And in that case, you know, unfortunately, one or two of the students did fall for the phishing attack. The email basically had like a link in it to a Google form, and it was sort of saying, hey, you're behind on your course payments or something. You need to put your information in here. But once it got surfaced to the security team, we came into the Threat Explorer and we used this tool here to bulk select about 1,600 messages and remove them. And we were able to kind of stop anyone else from being impacted by that attack. Now, beyond the detection and the response side of things in Defender for Office 365, we also have awareness and training capabilities. So, technology is only part of the puzzle when it comes to protecting your organization, because at the end of the day, your users are what you would consider your human firewall. So inside of Defender, we can do phish and malware simulation training that you can actually automatically schedule, so it goes out on a regular basis. And they've made it easy to kind of track your progress against a predicted compromise rate per simulation. It's based off of the sort of Microsoft intelligence about how other organizations have done at a global level and how your organization's done previously, and it just gives you a benchmark to say, am I doing good here or are we doing pretty bad here? So great kind of visibility into these campaigns, so you can adjust and do whatever is needed to help train the end users. So moving on to the next tool that we're going to talk about today, Defender for Endpoint. This thing's awesome, and it's way more than an antivirus tool. A lot of people hear Microsoft Defender and they just think of antivirus, but as you can see here, there's a lot more components to it than that. And with Defender for Endpoint, it's actually cross-platform as well. It's not just Windows. You got Mac, you got iOS and Android, virtual desktop infrastructure, and it can also protect your network devices as well. Those different network vendors you see there will integrate with Defender for Endpoint to provide protection. Now, one of the coolest things, from my perspective at least, with Defender is it comes with really robust vulnerability management capabilities. So some of our customers are not necessarily ready to go all in on Defender as soon as they buy their A5, because maybe they've still got investments in other endpoint protection products where the contract's still got a little bit to run. Well, the good news is that you can actually use Defender alongside third-party products to add a ton of value from a vulnerability management standpoint. It'll run in a passive mode, and you'll get a lot of insights into the security posture of your endpoints. So 100% recommend deploying it, if you're in that position at the moment. Now, when we do start using Defender to its fullest, one thing that I kind of see that's often overlooked is attack surface reduction rules. These are a great form of proactive security that are designed to harden your devices against potential threats. It's designed to add additional layers of protection beyond the endpoint protection. So, we get situations where there might be 0 days, or there might be malware that's new and hasn't been seen before, and the endpoint protection is not kind of caught up with it yet, right? Or I've even seen it where some ransomware attacks are designed to evade protection as well. So in that kind of situation, if you don't have anything else security-wise configured on the machine, a compromise can occur. However, Microsoft's added these rules, which are basically designed to stop processes and applications from behaving in ways that they shouldn't be. And they would block malware from propagating on the device and actually doing anything. So a quick example of where I've seen this in the real world. Earlier this year, there was a threat going around where it was coming in via email disguised to look like an encrypted email attachment. And we saw that people were opening this, it was infecting the machine, and it was then creating a whole bunch of rules inside of Outlook and resending itself out to like the entirety of your global address list. With one customer we were working with at the time, we happened to be doing this stuff anyway, and we helped them enable attack surface reduction rules. And there's one in particular that just kind of stops that type of threat from occurring. So highly, highly, highly recommend looking at these. These are a must-have when you're doing Microsoft Security and Defender for Endpoint. So network protection, this is a really cool feature as well. It's fed from Microsoft's threat intelligence, and once it's turned on, it will automatically block known malicious IP addresses, domains, all that kind of stuff from anything on the device. Doesn't matter if it's a web browser or not. If anything on it tries to reach out to something malicious, it's going to block it. And you also have the ability to add your own indicators in there as well. So Defender performs behavioral profiling that will baseline the system, and it'll actually monitor processes for suspicious activity. If it identifies an issue, it'll take action to stop the threat in its tracks right then and there. And it's also been proven to be capable against fileless malware, and it'll stop malicious activity from applications that are trusted as well as applications that are not trusted. So very robust, not just an antivirus scanner that's looking at hashes of files and comparing them to a database. Lots of machine learning and AI capability in here. Now, since we've been talking a bit about ransomware, there's a feature called tamper protection that's awesome, and highly recommend turning it on. So, as I mentioned a moment ago, ransomware threats, not only are they designed to evade protection, but they have been known to try and disable endpoint protection on the target. And tamper protection is a feature that was added to Defender for Endpoint to make sure that it can't do it. So make sure that one's turned on if you're using Defender. Now, mentioned that all of the Microsoft security tools are integrated, and that also goes for the Microsoft security tools and other areas like device management with Microsoft Intune. So Intune, very robust device management capability. Defender is deeply integrated with it. And if you use Intune, it makes the deployment and management and centralization of all of the different security policies and the different hardening things like the attack surface reduction rules. It makes it a lot easier to kind of deploy that stuff. So that's something else to look at as well. Now, Defender's got a really robust API and partner ecosystem behind it. So, whether it's integration with platforms like ServiceNow, or, maybe you've got some very specific reports that you want to get that are kind of what you would consider to be custom ones, integration to Power BI is there as well. And it's also got the API hooks so that you can add managed detection and response services like those that are delivered by us through our partner, Blackpoint Cyber. Now, moving on from Defender for Endpoint, let's take a quick look at Defender for Cloud Apps. So this is the cloud access security broker within A5. Think of this as threat protection for your cloud apps, but kind of like at the service level. So in the center of this, you can see the different sanctioned applications. So basically, Microsoft has collaborated with a lot of different vendors to vet their applications to ensure the security of them. So if we think about platforms like Okta, Slack, Google Workspace, all of these different tools that you might be using today, Blackboard. Essentially, there's a cloud discovery dashboard, and a lot of the applications that your users might be using have been vetted on some level, so they're going to show up in there. They're going to have a risk score associated with them, and maybe there's certain things that you don't want your users using, like maybe our standard is OneDrive, so we don't want folks putting stuff in Dropbox. you can actually use this dashboard inside of this tool to mark things as unsanctioned and stop users from accessing it. And that's all driven directly by the endpoint through the Defender for Endpoint sensor. We don't have to rely on anything on the firewall to do that. Now, looking kind of outside of the center circle and around some of the different things on here, so the app-to-app protection, that side of things kind of emphasizes discovering and implementing remediation for third-party integrations. So, we want to ensure that any application interactions remain secure, and we want to ensure that no risky OAuth applications are connected to the tenant, for example. So an example of that would be like some people like to use Calendly, and threat actors, seeing how easy it can be to add some of those apps, have made malicious versions of them that are fake that can open your tenant up to attacks, right? And so this tool kind of looks for that stuff and helps safeguard against those from being added, along with some other configurations you can do as well. From a continuous threat protection standpoint, essentially the approach is to detect, investigate, and promptly respond to threats using as much automation as possible. And one common thing I see here is malware protection across SharePoint and OneDrive service itself. There's some great rules in there to kind of get that enabled, because you don't know what's been synced up there years ago and forgotten about because it's not on someone's endpoint, so the endpoint protection might not be picking it up. There's also some great rules that provide protection against ransomware as well. It detects it like in the cloud environment, suspicious activity from accounts. So a couple of other things in here: SaaS security posture management. So it's dedicated to identifying misconfigurations and ensuring adherence to best practices, not just for Microsoft, but for other clouds as well. And the goal is to kind of empower you with the information so that you can even get your other cloud environments set up to best practices outside of Microsoft. And then, information protection. So it's all about protecting our sensitive data, right? And, a lot of you have stuff that's not just contained within the Microsoft ecosystem. You might be using Google Workspace, for example, right? So at that point, you've got a multi-cloud environment, and Defender for Cloud Apps for your A5 can actually monitor not only for potential exposure and violations and other threats inside of Microsoft, but actually in those other clouds as well. So yeah, even if you have a lot of data in Google Workspace, you might not have visibility into how people are signing into there and how data's moving in and out of it. Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps can provide you with multi-cloud protection over that as well, those workloads. So something that's kind of often overlooked. I think this is very important in education. Now, let's talk a little bit about the compliance side of A5. So Microsoft Purview offers information protection, insider risk management, and data loss prevention. It's all on the one unified platform, and it basically helps you fortify data security effectively so that you can develop a defense in depth approach when it comes to protecting your sensitive data. And these tools are crucial to protect against the double and triple extortion ransomware attacks that we talked about, because this gives you that extra lever to stop that stuff being copied out of your organization. And again, these tools will integrate with the Defender for Cloud Apps that we saw a moment ago to add protection to your multi-cloud environment. Now, you need all three defenses of protection to effectively secure your data from security incidents. This stuff works well when you do it together. So for example, if you use the information protection and the data loss prevention together, you're able to discover and automatically classify your data and prevent it from unauthorized use. In that same vein, if you use the information protection and the insider risk management together, you can understand a user's intent around sensitive data because of the way they're behaving, and identify like the most critical data risks in the organization. So, let's say you brought data loss prevention into that mix to make it the kind of full triangle, you can use a thing called adaptive protection, which lets you assign an appropriate data loss prevention policy based on the user's risk level as determined by the insider risk management side of things. So very powerful tools, and this is all driven by that A5 security and compliance licensing. So moving on from there, let's kind of explore, what this sort of looks like in the real world. So as it happens, Forrester did a recent study on Microsoft 365 A5. It was actually earlier this year, and it was focused on the ROI that K-12 and higher education institutions could achieve with A5. So really, prior to upgrading, a lot of these institutions faced expensive security incidents, which included ransomware payments, the brand damage, and disrupting the ability to deliver education, right? Post-upgrade, institutions saw a decrease in the complexity of handling security threats, and also a decrease in the complexity of just making sure they are compliant, meeting those cyber insurance requirements. And there's definitely long-term cost savings from investing in a platform, right? A security platform where it's all integrated together. So, a K-12 school system with like 60,000 students could cut their security costs by 25% and reduce significant breaches by 15%. So really real world kind of impactful numbers from taking the kind of platform approach to security and compliance, because it really is like a comprehensive package that you invest in here, instead of having to piecemeal it together with different solutions from different vendors that are harder to manage. And we can share the link to this report if anyone's interested to read it when we send out these slides after the presentation. So some best practices to consider when you're deploying A5 if you decide to go down this path. So with the attack surface reduction rules that we talked about, initially you're going to want to put them into an audit mode. Doing that allows you to monitor for the effects of actually turning them on, so that you can fine tune and whitelist anything that shouldn't be blocked by them that might be getting picked up as a false positive. Also, inside of the attack surface reduction rules, there's a thing called controlled folder access. It is awesome. Basically, when you turn it on, it protects the core folders in the operating system, as well as those that you might specify from being modified maliciously by processes. So this thing is like ultimate ransomware protection. If you turn it on, it's literally what it's designed for. Have to mention MFA. I still see organizations today that aren't using it, and I see organizations that are being breached because they're not using it. Recommend focusing on phish-resistant MFA and passwordless methods. So it's like your authenticator apps, that kind of thing, over SMS where possible. And we talked a little bit about data loss prevention. Inside of that A5, you actually get endpoint data loss prevention, where we're monitoring data moving in and out of the actual endpoint itself. And that just gives us an extra layer of visibility where we can provide protection against those ransomware threat actors that might be trying to move stuff out the door. And take advantage of the integration between Defender for Endpoint and Defender for Cloud Apps. I've got a couple of schools that I've worked with that have tried to turn on that cloud discovery dashboard I talked about, where we can see all the cloud apps that are being accessed. So you do get that at the A3 level, but you actually have to set up a security, like a log forwarder appliance on your network. And, it's a bit of effort, and you've got infrastructure to maintain. If you go to A5, it's just a flick of a switch, and Defender for Endpoint will populate that dashboard for you. So before we move on to the Q&A here, I want to let you know about a limited free limited time offer that we have at LevaCloud currently. So for organizations that want to evaluate the Defender suite of tools, or even Intune, to see if it's right for you, we're actually offering a free 6-hour proof of concept workshop. So Well, like I say, we'll send the slides afterwards. If you're interested in learning more about that free workshop, let us know. You can also see some of our paid offerings on this slide as well. We offer a comprehensive fixed fee pilot for those that want to kind of actually design, deploy, and test these different security and compliance tools within their environment. And then, beyond that, we understand that when you kind of take on A5, like there's a lot in there. We offer expert level managed services where we can either give you full management of the tools where we're quite hands-on, or just be there as your expert on call with unlimited level 3 support for your team as you're kind of going through the process of adopting and maintaining it. And having this best of breed tool set deployed is only part of the battle, right? You need dedicated human security expertise on your team that know how to detect the tradecraft used by these threat groups and respond to any signs of compromise on a 24/7 basis. This can be a huge challenge for internal teams that are already stretched thin. So our MDR service kind of tops all of this off to provide a complete end-to-end security solution. So with that, really appreciate everyone coming along today. And we'll kind of spend a few minutes here to see if anyone wants to use that Q&A button at the top to ask any questions. And for anything that we can't answer right now, we'll definitely follow up afterwards. So I guess Tony and Jackson, I'll kind of pass things back to you here and see if we get any questions.
Thank you, Gareth. I appreciate it. So I'd just like to direct everyone, if you do have questions, the chat is disabled, unfortunately, but there's a Q&A section if you want to throw some questions in that. While I'm waiting for people to click around and find that, we do have some frequently asked questions based on some other webinars we've done. So I'll kick it off maybe to get it started. Gareth, can you share some examples of how school districts have successfully utilized the security features in the Microsoft 365 A5 to protect against ransomware or other threats?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, really, a lot of times it's doubling down on best practices. So, for example, when we're putting Defender for Endpoint out there, let's make sure we are configuring things like attack surface reduction rules. And even, I mentioned Intune deeply integrates. There's a thing inside of Intune called security baselines, and they are, if you think about attack surface reduction as being stopping processes and applications from doing things that they shouldn't, security baselines is more just generally hardening the Windows operating system with Microsoft best practice security configurations. Those two things combined do a really good job, in addition to everyone's favorite, MFA, gotta have it.
All right. Thank you, Lenny. I appreciate it. We got another question here. So what are some common challenges school districts might face when trying to implement and optimize the tools in A5, and how can they overcome them?
So one thing I see quite commonly, because MFA can be a problem, right? And that definitely opens you up to a certain set of attacks. But I guess one other sort of challenge I see is a lot of education environments have left a thing open called legacy authentication protocols. And basically what that means is there's one in particular called authenticated SMTP, and it's used by a lot of your multifunction devices and that kind of thing to do like scan to email, essentially, right? Now, what a lot of people don't realize, even when you've got MFA turned on, that protocol can be used as a threat vector to completely bypass MFA. So it's very common that I'll see threat actors from like China, Russia, all around the world, whether or not they're even really there, who knows, doing password spray attacks against user accounts using that protocol. So as two things, that the A5 solves for there is one, being able, well, A3 level, you can kind of lock that protocol down so that, maybe it's only our actual public IP address that can use it. But two, as part of the A5, you get a thing called risk-based conditional access policies. And it allows us to do something that says, hey, if we see a user account signing in from places that are unusual, Because with education, we can't always like geo-block it and say that only the US is allowed to sign into the tenant. Or two, you know, if we see that there is a problem with the user, like they've shown up, because this is actually a feature you get as part of the A5, you know, they show up on a leaked password list somewhere on the internet that Microsoft's threat intelligence has picked up, then that user should reset their password. So those proactive risk-based policies are a big thing I see in education to help bolster security. I don't know. Did I answer that right? Was that what we were asking?
No, yeah. No, I think so. I'm not seeing any more questions come in, so I'd like to just end with one more here, as this comes up. Could you elaborate on the role of expert support services in enhancing cybersecurity measures using A5 that a school district might be able to take advantage of?
You want to take that one, or do you want me to?
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, how this comes up a lot when, like, after we do a proof of concept with people. It's like, okay, we like the tools, right? And you don't need to take our word for it on the tools, right? As Jackson will tell you, Gartner, Forrester, a lot of really, really smart people with a lot of money have evaluated these tools, and they're saying that they're in the top tier, Gartner Magic Quadrant. And then it's okay. Well, we have staff that do a lot of different jobs, right? In education, you guys wear a lot of hats. You guys and girls are very busy. So how do we get these things implemented? How do we get them to the point where they're running efficiently, but also how do we account for the changes? That's where support usually will come in. Now, Microsoft has their own version of support. We're more of a bolt-on type service, and there are other companies, you can look for them, that can provide that expert level support to the people that can be at times inaccessible at Microsoft due to scheduling, like their black belts, for example. So having a partner that really knows those tools, if your organization is committing to A5, you're going to want to look at finding some additional help or resource in order to make sure that the tools are running efficiently and stay running efficiently as Microsoft continues to invest billions of dollars into them to make them better. Any other questions? Jackson, you got anything for us?
No, just to build off that last sentiment there. You know, again, I talk to many customers, again, speaking to understanding the value potential that is there to be unlocked. But like you mentioned, on the ground, getting this stuff up and running, so to speak, right, and contextualized with to the specifics of any given institution, integrated into workflows, build new workflows built out. So much that can be difficult to appreciate within our Microsoft ecosystem. You know, that's, I understand, that's it. That's really where guys, teams like Leva Cloud really shine, right? That last mile, if you will. Of course, the evaluation side, but understanding, hey, what does this really mean, and how can it add value day to day for my team? So no, I just want to say again, thank you so much. This was a fantastic presentation, and everybody attending, always open to feedback, always appreciate feedback, and want to make sure we're always making the best use of your time, providing the most up-to-date, top-of-mind information. And so with that, you know, there were next steps, I believe Tony mentioned, following up with pitch deck and with information regarding their offerings. I've only ever had customers say great things about their POCs, frankly. Customers of all sizes, smaller community colleges, larger universities, you name it. Everyone's gotten immense value from it. So I highly recommend that exploration, and we'll be in touch. Tony, I'll give it to you to close out.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks again, everyone, for attending. I hope you guys have a great Halloween. Myself and Laura will follow up with everyone via email to give you the slide deck. And once we have time to just doctor up the recording, I'll send you a link to that as well. It'll be a YouTube link. In an effort to not end up in all of your spam filters, I'll send you an email without all that stuff attached, and just respond back, and then I'll send it. Usually emails, when you get an email from someone that you've never gotten an email from, your spam filter should catch it if it has a giant PowerPoint attached to it, as well as an email link or a link in the email. So we'll get it to you. Be on the lookout from an email from myself and Laura, and we'll make sure that you guys get it. Okay. Thank you.
Of course. Take care, everybody.
Thanks,
Talk
everyone.
soon. Thanks,
Bye
guys.
this time.